Chapter 4. After the boy had fed the children and eaten something himself, he sat down by the warm stove and looked out of the window. There was nothing else to do. Now and then a cloud would cross the sun that had finally burned its way out of the gray. The boy watched the cloud shadows roll over the fields and pass over the cabin. They darkened the windows as they passed. He carried in the wood for the night before the sun began to weaken. Then he looked out the window again to where his mother would appear. Finally, a speck moving on the road. He watched it grow. "She's coming," he said to the younger children, and they crowded around him and pushed their faces against the window. "She's been gone long enough to walk to town and more," he added. "What will she bring?" one of the children asked. "She'll bring nothing, but maybe things to eat. She won't bring no stick candy. Don't ask her for none. Don't ask her for nothing. Nothing." Several times during the day, the boy had said to himself, maybe they'll let him come home if she takes back the stuff. Some people might, but some won't. But his father was not with her. "I gave the stuff back," she said when she got to the cabin. The boy's throat hurt with a great lump, and when he swallowed, it would hurt more. If his father had come, it would have been easy. Together they would have found Saunder's body and buried him. When the boy's mother heard that he had not found Sounder under the cabin, she stood in the doorway and thought for a long time. If one of her children had stood in the door that long, she would have said, "Go in or out, child." "Creatures like to die under something," she said at last. "And there ain't nothing else close to crawl under. He wasn't hit in his vitals, I reckon. He's got a flesh wound. He's gone into the woods to draw out the poison with oak leaf acid." Now she shut the door and put her basket on the tin-top table. "Poke up the fire," she said to the boy. "Oak leaves has strong acid that toughens the skin, just like the oak bark that they'd use to tan leather in the tannery. The creature beds down with the wound against the heap of oak leaves. The leaves make a poultice that draws out the poison and heals the wound with a hard brown scab. That's why creatures head for the swampland around the big water when the mange hits. Wet leaves heal better. Saunder's blood would wetten the leaves," the boy said after he had stood a long time with the poker in his hand. His eyes were fixed on the open stove door, watching the yellow flame change shape and turn to blue and red. Sounder was jumping at the wagon and hard to hit, the boy's mother said. "I think maybe he was hit a glancing shot that tore off the hide on his head and shoulder. If he was, he's gone to the Jack Oak woods to heal himself. The Lord shows his creatures how to do. If he ain't dead now, he'll come limping home, powerful hungry, in time. Tomorrow or the day after?" the boy asked. "Longer, maybe 4 days, or more like 7. But don't be all hope, child. If he had a deep head wound, he might be addled crazy and not know where he's wandered off to die." The boy's mother had brought home the empty meal sack. In her basket she had some fat meat, potatoes, and a small bottle of vanilla flavoring, which she had bought with the money she got for her walnut kernels. From the bottom of the basket she took out a folded brown paper bag, to which she poured each night's pickings and put it on the shelf. She brought home an empty cardboard box, which the storekeeper had given her. She didn't say where she had been, besides the store, or what had happened. The boy couldn't see her eyes were filled with hurt and said nothing. The younger children remembered not to ask her anything except looking in the empty box. One said, "Nothing in here. I'm going to use it to put a cake in," the mother said. "Better go out and crack the nuts for the night's picking before dark," she said to the boy. The boy scooped up the tin pail of nuts from the big box under the stove and went out to the flat, cracking stone. With his knees still sore from crawling under the cabin, he hesitated a long time before he knelt on the frozen earth. Standing, he looked one way and then another, tracing the fence rows that had more oak than other trees. The far lowland woods and the foothills. "I'll go there first tomorrow," he said to himself as he faced the foothills. There's a big patch of oak trees there, and whenever Sounder was given his head, he picked the hills for hunting. When night came, his mother hummed and picked the kernels. She did not tell a story. The boy wanted to ask who carried in wood to keep the people in jail warm. He knew they had big stoves in big jails. Once his mother had told him a story about 3 people named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego who were in jail. Some mean governor or sheriff got mad and had them all thrown right into the jail stove, as big as a furnace. But the Lord blew out the fire and cooled the big stove in a second. And when the jailer keeper opened the stove door, there stood Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego singing, cool water, the Lord's got green pastures and cool water. Tell me about Joseph in the jail and the stone quarry in Egypt, and chiseling out rocks to make old Pharaoh's gravestone," the boy asked. But his mother kept on humming, and the boy went back to his thinking. No stove could be that big, he thought. He watched the red coals through the open draft in the stove door brighten each time the wind blew loud enough to make a low whistling noise in the stovepipe. A burning chunk stick fell against the inside of the stove, but the boy did not try to convince himself that it might be the thump of Sounder scratching fleas under the floor. He was thinking of tomorrow. Tomorrow he would go into the woods and look for Sounder. The wind whistling in the pipe was bothersome, he said. He hated the cold wind. It blew through his clothes and chilled his body inside and made him shiver. He hoped the wind would not be blowing in the woods tomorrow. The wind made the woods noisy. The boy liked the woods when they were quiet. He understood quiet. He could hear things in the quiet. But quiet was better in the woods than it was in the cabin. He didn't hear things in the cabin quiet. Cabin quiet was long and sad. "Turn the pipe damper a little, and the whistling will stop," his mother said at last. The next day he walked the great woodlands, calling Sounder's name. The wind blew through his clothes and chilled him inside. When he got home after dark, his clothes were torn. His throat hurt with a great lump choking him. His mother fed him and said, Child, you must not go into the woods again. Sounder might come home again, but you must learn to lose, child. The Lord teaches the old to lose. The young don't know how to learn it. Some people is born to keep. Some is born to lose. I was born to lose, I reckon, but Sounder might come back." Weeks went by and Sounder did not come back. And that's where we'll end today.